Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. It is another epi of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you, fine feathered individuals, to look back, to reminisce about what was Split 2 across multiple regions. Call them Split 2 spring season, rounds 1 to 2. Everyone's got a different name for it, but it's the second split of 3 splits on the year. And there were a lot of surprises, dramatic events. We're calling them the juiciest storylines to go through from a lot of these major regions. There was a lot that happened, and a lot of it feels like a distant memory. And first and foremost, at the front of that, of course, with how things ended for T1, clinching that spot at MSI. Remember, they had a little bit of a AD carry carousel issue where you had Coma and Joe Marsh giving bad PR answers about why Guma was getting benched or why Smash was starting. And now in hindsight, this all just looks like unnecessary made-up drama.
Yep, and I think a lot of people could have come to that type of conclusion, even in the middle of all the drama and all the things that were going on. Again, multiple weeks, months ago for T1, we were dealing with this situation around it, the choices of the coaching staff, Joe Marsh coming in saying he wanted Gumayusi, the fan base, all sorts of things involved in this scenario. It didn't take a real rocket scientist to boil it down and go and understand, okay, on one side, you've got Smash, an incredible prospect, someone that is talented enough to be a starting member on, I'd say, about 90, maybe 92% of the teams around the world. Not even just the LCK, but not on a team that has Gumayusi in that starting role. For me, the reliability, the contributions, the clutch factor, the addition with him alongside Kyria, how it makes them both better as that bottom lane. I don't think there is an answer that you would want to take that over with for T1. And I don't know why we were spending so much time fiddling, messing around with it when you see why people wanted Gumayusi in that lineup throughout this playoff run for T1.
Yeah, and it is ridiculous now looking back to be like, why was this even a thing? It's at the time we even touched on Guma he had a great start to the split. It's not like he was even underperforming. So this really, I mean, it felt like a way. This is obviously ridiculous, but we had T1 at the forefront of discussion, even though it was Gen.G and Hanwha Life that were dominating early, and that's just because, obviously, how massive the T1 fan base is, and having any kind of drama around the roster after we already had the drama of Zeus leaving the squad. They were always on the tip of our tongue.
Yeah, I think that's also the additional factor that plays into everything that went down was the drama about Zeus in the off season and, you know, the communication between T1 and everything else that broke down and how that played out. Having then this situation with Smash and Guma compounded to that one for a lot of the fans of that old roster, the roster that did earn those world championship titles. And it's understandable, but it was still one of those ones where you had to have faith in Gumayusi. I think the announcement and handling of this whole situation, regardless of whether you approved of it or not, was completely disrespectful to Gumayusi, talking about needing time away to regain form. Regain form? Have you seen this guy? What form is there to regain? He is who he is, and he is Gumayusi, the star of a T1 bottom.
I think the biggest takeaway from this whole thing, and you can even throw in the Zeus thing as well, is the T1 organization and management took a hit to their credibility. And this is the team we're usually praising for being one of the most well-run, well-organized, well-oiled machines in the entire eSports ecosystem. But seeing all the, Guma wasn't even getting scrim time, or Smash was starting without even him scrimming, and then Guma didn't get any playing time, and then the debacle of the statements from the coaching staff and the CEO combined with maybe the drama that was going on with Zeus behind the scenes, and you're going, well, T1, all of a sudden, maybe this isn't the squad to play for.
From what seemed like the pinnacle of League of Legends throughout this stretch, that dynasty run for the team, all of a sudden became one of the most dysfunctional organizations that you were seeing at that point, given the, you know, Zeus leaving and then Gumayusi situation here with Smash and how everything was poorly handled in that regard. There was the rebound, the miraculous rebound, and Gumayusi, of course, is a big part of that for T1. But again, it goes with the same thing of what, you know, kind of eased over a lot of these thoughts and maybe, erase some of these mistakes in the past for some people is, of course, Faker as well, still in the mid lane, rolling on strong for T1. Everything's okay. But we did obviously go through quite a rough and tumultuous patch for what seems like no real good reason.
Maybe it was the 400 IQ play because Faker was struggling at the time. It was a distraction from Faker not performing to have all this off the riff drama. Joe Marsh and Faker are always 16 steps ahead of everybody else. But what should have been talked about more this whole split was a team going undefeated through the regular season again, and of course that is Gen.G with the most under the radar 18-0 split that you will ever see. This should have been a juicier storyline, and the case in point for being spoiled by the greatness that is Gen.G. Chovy joined this team in 2022. Since Chovy has joined Gen.G, they have a record 337 wins, 113 losses. That is good enough for a 74.9% win rate. Mark, if you had a 74% win rate in solo queue, you might be the greatest solo queue player of all time, hands down.
I don't know if I've even had one of my best days in solo queue reach that type of win percentage going on. That is some spectacular stuff from Gen.G, doing it out here on the professional stage in the LCK hard against some of these incredibly elite teams, finding a way to remain perfect. And yes, it doesn't carry maybe as much power, as much weight, because we have seen a perfect iteration from Gen.G before, and that didn't culminate with a world championship title. So I think that is part of why maybe it isn't generating quite as much attention, quite as much praise as it should be, is the big point I want to make out, because it should be getting that type of attention, how good these performances were. You look at through those statistics, you're going through the individual player examinations. And again, for a player that we talk about so much, heaping unbelievable amounts of praise and are proven right with that performance, Chovy is at a whole other level. I don't know exactly how to quantify, how to talk about this thing, but he seems to have taken another step above for himself in the individual aspect. And I would actually relate it more so towards kind of an experience, a leveling up that you have to gain through these challenges, through these failures, something like Faker has, where you can dial it up in these extreme moments, find that zone. I think Chovy is really approaching that type of territory himself.
Yeah, and we'll do a whole video about this, but he's approaching like second best all-time player. During that stretch with Gen.G, he has a KDA of 6.1. That sounds pretty good. Now to put that fully into context, only 2 mid laners had a KDA that high in the spring split, or split 2 this year. This is over a 3-year stretch, and only 2 mid laners did that for a single split, and of course one of them was Chovy.
The excellency and the consistency is just outright unmatched by anybody within League of Legends, even the GOAT himself, Faker. We have seen various levels of his production, his capabilities and whatnot, and what you can rely upon him. That has not changed for Gen.G. The factor of what Chovy is, how he can impact his lane, how he can impact these fights later on, his skill is just so immense that he is able to do that. He is executing on it excellently. He is being supported by the rest of the Gen.G roster. Don't want to forget about the boys, and especially giving that shout out to Duro down in the bottom lane, because it's easy talking about the Chovys, the Canyons, Ruler, Keen even in the top side. It's harder when it's Duro and you're trying to find that, momentum for him. And he has built that up throughout this split, not losing a beat to many of these extremely highly regarded professionals. And he has brought his own special skill and sauce to that bottom lane alongside Ruler. This really is the combination of all the amazing things that led to this perfect record for Gen.G.
And, the fact that Chovy's the only guy who's been there over that 3-year stretch is why he's the easy one to talk about. But now, the biggest what if from the split in the LCK is we could have had this perfect Gen.G matching up against this momentum rising T1 in the finals. We were denied.
I didn't want to talk about it. Because the more that it started lining up and picturing it in my head, going through talking about everything with Smash and Gumayusi, and then how it culminates with T1's rise through these playoffs. And then we're talking about the perfection of Gen.G, and we end off on, we'll just send you off to MSI and see you later. Well, we're not going to get it. A showdown, a throwdown between these two.
two ships in the night, they never collide. What could have been?
I'm telling you, this is going to be the missed opportunity of the year for LoL esports right here, missing out, getting this type of matchup with this type of hype and expectations heading towards it.
By the way, now heading to MSI, Gen.G hasn't lost a series since February 22nd. We're going to that first stand final against Hanwha Life. It's 3.5 months by the time MSI kicks off.
That is actually insane to think about that it has been since that point. It's been perfection. It has been W's only for the Gen.G squad. Going to be something to see when they head towards MSI.
Big surprise, juiciest storyline in the LEC was from a surprise squad. It felt like heading into Split 2, it was going to be all about Carmine Corp after first stand. G2, can they come back? Oh my god, Fnatic has started so incredibly well. These are the three-headed dragon that is the LEC, and amazing that Moi Star Koi even started off the split with back-to-back losses to K-Corp and G2. They were close. You said, okay, yeah, they're not quite there. And even when we got into playoffs, people were still not really thinking about K-Corp or Moi Star Koi as legit contenders. Even after they beat KC, they said, okay, well, that was kind of a fluke game 5. In the rematch, KC is going to come away with it. G2 in the teaser video is saying, yeah, we're more worried about KC. They're the better team. And here we are, after Moi Star Koi beats them in back-to-back Game 5s, K-Corp that is, and then kind of dismantled G2 in the finals. The level up that this team did heading into playoffs, I don't think was on anybody's bingo card.
I'm giving us a half pat on the back for this one in calling Moi Star Koi, because we did say that was the greatest 0-2 weekend that was possible for Moi Star Koi, the way that they looked in those losses, despite, again, stepping away as the loser on the day to those two teams at the start of the year. Now, that being said, I wasn't predicting this. I was not predicting the level up and explosion that we did get to see through these playoff runs of Moi Star Koi, specifically in those head-to-heads against Carmine Corp and G2. Carmine Corp is a big one, almost arguably bigger for me than G2, even though G2 is that dominant force that has been at the very top of the region type of thing. I think K-Corp is obviously, with that momentum moving in to that picture as we saw throughout the winter split and first stand. But yes, having that rivalry, Spanish-French rivalry that is built in and is extremely passionate from these two sides, to be able to have that be at that top level of the LEC, that's a different story. That's something that changes it up and keeps moving forward. And then again, you look at this roster and what it means for the LEC as well. You see a lot of very good domestic talent that has been brought up, supported as well in this organization, and supplemented with international talent. Yes, that international talent is North America, Canada. You're welcome very much from our boy Jojo Pyun stepping over there. He's had his mistakes. He's got his downsides as well. But brings it someone that can elevate your team to another level and push it forward. And that is exactly what we have seen from them. And I think the intensity that you saw from them in the playoffs is a good indication of how much everybody on this roster has bought in to moving it forward.
And you saw the passion from the entire team. You've heard Elyoya talk about just the desire to win on this squad, especially for Jojo Pyun. And I think we knew came with something extra to prove after things on Cloud9 kinda. We said this is a trajectory for his career. This is a, crossroads. Where's it going to go? There's still a whole, half year of games left. But going to MSI, coming back to the home country over here in Canada, obviously incredible for them to do that. And the mental and preparedness is what Elyoya talked about heading into playoffs for this team. And again, you saw top to bottom this team step up. All the kind of check marks we were talking about this team hitting. Mirwin being able to play some spicier picks. Jojo playing with confidence and showcasing that you can put Supa on a hyper carry and take over games, which is what we saw when they were at their best last year. Check, 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 check.
And I'm feeling really good about this one because the times we have seen the, Mad Lions, Movistar have been on the international stage, a lot of times it really has felt they've lacked that confidence, that bravado that someone like Jojo brings to the team. And especially when you have to have your eyes, your sights aimed up so much of the time at the LCK or the LPL, it helps to maybe have a little bit of that overconfidence, a little bit of that inflated self-belief in yourself, the way that someone's ego like Jojo does. And I think that combo with the talented roster here and the young building parts and Super down in the bottom lane, the interesting picks you can get from Merwin, and of course, the synergy with Elyoya. I love that this Moi Star Koi team really found a way to shine and make things super exciting for how it's going to play out in summer between them, Carmine Corp, and G2 in the LEC.
Unfortunately, the juiciest, maybe not most interesting, but most talked about thing for the LTA is the disaster of the rebrand, especially when you're comparing it now with the LCP, which when we look at the peak viewership for Split 2, almost 250,000 more peak viewers for the LCP, 4K more average viewers, and we were... I think some people were worried about the Pacific rebrand, but seeing the Vietnamese, Japanese teams come in has just hyped up the region. There's tons of storylines. It's exciting. It's competitive. There's good teams, way more good teams than there were in years past. Whereas the LTA, the first split, okay, you saw the North just kind of beat up on South, and you're like, this is the main rivalry cross conference. And then split 2, you get back to just domestic, and it just feels stale. If it's not Cloud9 versus FlyQuest matching up, so many of the matchups are kind of, you shrug, okay.
It's a weird time to have both of these rebrands go on side by side and go in completely different directions for how they have changed through and where the differences are. Because yes, the LCP did have a lot of reservations early on. I think a lot of fans were worried about losing regional identity for some of these smaller regions that were making up the LCP, and how this was going to work out and where the domination would be for some of these ultra level teams like PSG Talon at the time. But we have seen that there is that competition. Yes, Talon is there, but of course, so is the Marines, so is Wales, so is the Flying Oysters up and around in that territory, fighting it out, showing us good games. This is a way different viewer experience as well compared to the old days of having to have 4 or 5 different streams open to make sure you can keep track of all the different games going on and whatever. Now it's just right there, LCP, and you can grab it and have it, and people have been taking it in, consuming it, watching these games, getting more invested and knowing more about these teams. And I think part of that plays in to the success of these teams from those minor regions when you talk about international events, pushing above their weight, finding more success than against expectations. But then you look at the other side of how everything has gone right for the LCP and everything has mostly gone wrong for the LTA on the flip side. Now, I think it's one of these ones where it's irreversible. It isn't just simply slap LCS back on there for the LTA and problems are going to be solved. You're operating in a very different ecosystem, very different challenge as far as where things are going to be, how many seats are available for worlds contending, all sorts of things like that. And you need to find a way to work around it as the LTA now to try and rebuild some of that interest and some of that passion back. But unfortunately, with a rebrand that has gone as poorly as this, you're going to have absolute complete loss. People that won't come back, won't tune in despite whatever efforts will go in.
And amazingly, we were supposed to see the league condensed to 8 teams and have the competitiveness raised. Every team, the floor should be brought up with 10 less players to choose from, and somehow we're sitting here and it feels like the competitiveness across the board is worse, and there's an even bigger gap from the top to bottom, and that is an issue that's going to be a whole lot more difficult to fill for the LTA. Not too many issues in terms of a new era joining in the LPL. Obviously, seeing anyone's legend pick up their first title, seeing Tarzan pick up their first title is the best storyline from this split in the LPL. But even going deeper, you can say we've now fully, a couple of years ago, left the EDG, RNG era of the LPL, but now the last 2 champion mid laners are Cream and now Shanks, and JDG bowing out early, top esports bowing out early. It feels like, again, we are truly entering a new era in the LPL.
Oh man, don't you love it? It's like the Baskin Robbins of League of Legends leagues, regions, man. There's a flavor for every day of the month in the OPL. There's a team for every year that you go through all the different eras. You're right, we did for a long time, very much the region defined by RNG, and then you have a brief window of IG looking like, oh, well, we're going to be right up there. And of course, we know how that quickly fizzles out, but you got a little bit of Fun Plus Phoenix thrown in there, some EDG action, and then you move into the territory of what we've been in the last kind of 2-3 years of the BLG top esports JDG era of the LPL. They're still all a factor. They're still very much around in that elite territory, but there is a new kid on the block, and that is Anyone's Legend. And they've been around the last little bit. If you've been paying attention, you will know that they have been in this type of zone. But if you aren't paying attention closely to the LPL, here's your surprise: the champions, Anyone's Legend. That's Samurai Panda. He is up there, and he's very first time as the champions of the LPL.
And it feels like, you know, since like 2022, that JDG BLG, it was very much a one dominant team. No one else is really at their level. There wasn't much competitive variety within the LPL, and Anyone's Legend were clearly the best team. They beat BLG twice back to back. But it still feels like heading into Split 3, this league could be completely wide open, and there's 4 or 5 teams that you could see winning a title.
And I think that will change at the end of that split. I think this is going to be one of the ones that kind of defines the next year or two in the LPL, is going to be whether we see Anyone's Legend continue it, put that pressure on, add another to the trophy case type of situation, and build up themselves of a new dynasty in the LPL. Or is it going to continue to be the challengers, the other usurpers to take over and keep this changing of hands, hot seat of who is that champion of the region? Because yes, BLG, JDG, top esports, they're not going to be going away. They will be hungry and looking to take back that title. And I can't wait to see the fights of it all in the LPL.
AL is at least proving that you don't need to have this superstar on paper mega team, because this cast of misfits have proven that the 5 sum of their parts together greater than anyone else in the LPL. But that is it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you. Absolutely gorgeous individuals.